Happy Tuesday, everyone. Here I am, end of the day here, and I just had some thoughts. People have been sending me messages in the last couple of days. I had a great turnout at my book signing at Parks Blueberry. It was so nice seeing so many lovely ladies and so many ladies that I used to be in prayer group with when I lived in Chatham. So thank you, Dawn, and thank you, Hope. And it was so fantastic to see everybody. And, people have been messaging me that read the book right away, and we're so blessed. And that just blesses my heart. And I had someone send me a message, and I just wanted to share a little bit because I had some thoughts. I thought, wow, that's interesting. She says, and I'll read it here, I didn't even sense you were angry through any of your journey. She says, geez, I think I would have just been livid with the diagnosis and the lack of treatment at the hospital. And I thought, oh, wow, isn't that interesting? Because I didn't feel like I come across that way. I felt like I was raw and unplugged. And I guess the way I was raised and just my life in general, I try not to have that stinking thinking, because I think of the Proverbs 18:21, that there's life and death in the power of our tongue. And our words can either tear down or build up. And, I was just reminded of that when she said that. I thought, wow, that's interesting, because so many times we get overwhelmed when we hear a word, like cancer. We can get so overwhelmed and so sucked in, and that can really affect the outcome of what happens. And I thought, it's interesting. And I thought I'm just going to read a little portion of my book, because it took me back to that moment of when I was diagnosed. And anybody that knows me knows at the time I had my own tea room in Petrolia. Super busy, working around the clock, like 80 hours a week. It was stupid busy. And it wasn't smart, and I would never do it like that again. But sometimes when you're on that cancer or that hamster wheel of life, it's hard to jump off. So anyway, I go back to December 1st. December 1st seemed to turn over on the calendar at lightning speed. I had a specialist appointment that was booked in Sarnia, which was about 20 minutes from where I lived. And that day I snuck out of work early to head to my appointment to get my biopsy results from the doctor. I didn't have much time to even think about what the specialist might say, to be honest. Life had been so hectic. I was kind of coasting through, just checking off my to-do list every day and not doing much more. My mom wanted to come to the appointment, so of course I said yes. She'd always been my walking medical Rolodex up until now in my life. Of course, her being a nurse, I always received extra details that the average bear wouldn't pick up on. That was Mom. The doctor walked in looking pretty serious, the kind of seriousness that would make you want to say, can you go back out that door and we'll try this all over again? Then everybody would smile. Unfortunately, that didn't happen that day. He looked at me with the papers in his hand and he said, Connie, I am so sorry to tell you this, but you have cancer. It's a very aggressive, invasive breast cancer. I stared at him in disbelief, and I responded, what do you mean I have cancer? How could I? You have followed me for the last 2.5 years and ordered 7 mammograms. How could something, if anything at all, be missed? You told me not to worry and that cancer wasn't painful at all. At first you told me I possibly had an infection and you put me on antibiotics trying to clear it up for 3 months. Of course, he already knew all these details. He was the doctor, but it helped me do a brain dump for all that information to get it off my chest. What kind of nightmare was I experiencing? I was utterly stunned. How in the world could this be happening to me? How could I be hearing this big C word? I felt like the whole room was caving in, and I could feel myself getting warm and wanting to cry. I was red hot mad. Mad because they missed it. Like, how could they have when the lump was now the size of an egg? Like, seriously, I kept asking and thinking to myself, this sucker is getting huge. I can't even imagine that this is normal. You trust the voice of the doctor, but meanwhile, I was learning in these last few seconds to trust that still small voice inside of you. I was overwhelmed because I had an 8-year-old special needs daughter who needed me to be well. Lastly, I was upset because I had a successful business that I had loved and knew this wasn't going to translate well for it. How in the world could any of this be fair? The doctor explained to me that the type of breast cancer that I had was not picked up in a mammogram. It would only be flagged in an MRI or an ultrasound to then do a biopsy. My brain was processing all this in slow motion like a cartoon. I was trying to concentrate on what he was saying. I could see his lips moving, but my brain was still stuck back on the word cancer, and I couldn't compute anything else after that. He had proceeded to tell me that this breast cancer was rare. Only less than 5% of the breast cancers out there. At this point, I was pretty much feeling limited edition, to say the least. I guess that explained why I was sent for the biopsy. He must have been stumped by his own protocols. I was still in shock and miffed after 7 mammograms to find out that does not do one thing at all to detect the type of cancer that I had been dealing with. Seemed like an enormous bunch of nonsense that I had just walked through, and to say the least, I wasn't happy at all. The doctor himself looked a little uneasy, and I gathered that this was not the way things usually play out for him, especially after telling me over the last year that I was young and I was perfectly normal. It was not easy to look at my mom's face, trying to fight back the tears and be strong for me that day in the office. I knew that was the kind of news that she did not want to hear at all. I just felt like crumbling to the floor and sobbing in a ball. Of course, that would solve nothing, but just help me puke out my emotions at that moment in time. I'm sure only a few seconds passed by, but it seemed like an eternity at that moment. I had never prepared myself to be sitting here and listening to these life-changing words and news. Sitting there in disbelief while my mind raced, I had a million questions I wanted to spit out all at once. I was finding it difficult to catch my breath, and I was feeling very flushed. I said a quick prayer, and I cried out the name of Jesus inside of me. This is the only thing I could think to do, and the only name I could think to say. I knew that there was power in that name, and that was exactly what I needed. I was desperate for the power of Jesus to show up in the room right then and take over all of these garbage of emotions that the devil was trying to stick me with. Slowly, I could feel that my demeanor was starting to shift. After whispering the name of Jesus inside, I could feel strength beginning to flood over me. All of a sudden, it was like a switch had been flipped. God's got this, and I am for sure letting him have it to take care of. Nothing is too difficult for him, but it is all too much for this little 40-year-old me. So that's just a section of when I got diagnosed and the day that I had gone to the office. And, I talk about that in my story. But I was just thinking, wow, this lady had said, like, I don't know how you did it. You feel like you didn't get mad. And I think being in alignment with how you think and the words you speak are so important, because sometimes people say, well, I don't know how you went through that and you kept your cool and da 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 da. And it's like, you know what, until you actually are going through something and you are fighting for your life, and you know that life and death are in the power of your tongue, and you have to be very careful and intentional what you speak, and you want that miracle pulled down from heaven. And, it changes everything, the way you look at life. And I suppose being a Christian, being the mother of a special needs child, I really had to get rid of stinking thinking long before, because I would have never made it through my journey till now, so I just wanted to jump on and encourage people that, Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And I'm in my office today because I was at the desk. I kind of moved off my dining room table here. So, but I thought I'm just going to jump on. But I was so encouraged by all the messages that I have received in the last month. I just hit a month of putting my book out. And, it's amazing how God can use our testimony and our story to encourage others. And when you're going through, I always say, when you're going through that messy middle, you're just thinking, oh, I just want to breathe, and it's so hard, but at the same time, it can be such a test and such a life-changing experience. I know for myself, it gave me compassion for other people. And I was just actually chatting with a friend today of someone that they know and love and care about, that got a cancer diagnosis. And it just takes me back, and I just have such compassion for people in those situations of a diagnosis, that doesn't sound good, in a situation that you are in pain, that, you're dealing with whatever it is, like a special needs child, a relationship that's gone bad, just disappointment, that you just want to say, forget it, I can't do this. But you know what I found myself when I couldn't even have the strength to pray, to know what to pray, I learned that I just whispered the name of Jesus, 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 Jesus. And I am telling you, when I knew nothing else to say, when I was so overwhelmed that I couldn't spit any words out, and when tears were streaming down my face because I was so raw and unglued with what was happening, I just whispered the name of Jesus. I listened to the worship music. I listened to healing scriptures. And you could feel strength arising in you. And our strength comes from the Lord. I always said, I chose to believe the report of Dr. Jesus. And I just want to encourage anybody today that is going through a bad report, a bad relationship, struggling with addiction. There's all kinds of things in this world that we are walking through. But you know what? God has great plans, like Jeremiah 29:11. That's another thing that I hung on to in the middle of a cancer diagnosis. I'm like, no, God has great plans for Connie. God's not finished with me yet. So I said, my friend Cheryl, she says, you know what? You just keep stomping on the devil in those high-heeled shoes. And she never forgot that all those years that I had said that, when I was first diagnosed. And it's true, just put the devil where he belongs and keep stomping on his ugly head, and remember that God has great plans for you. Get rid of your stinking thinking, and hang on to the promises of God, and speak life, speak blessings, because what comes out of your mouth actually matters. And I just want to encourage people with that today. And never forget, of course, that little is much when God is in it. Hang on to Jesus. He will never disappoint you. You know what? He never said that life was going to be easy and that we weren't going to have trials, but he is there holding our hands through our trials. And like my red vest story, you never know when you're going to be entertaining angels. So be kind to people, be Jesus with skin on, and try to have that compassion for everybody that you meet. Because you know what? When that becomes a lifestyle, then when you get the bad word, and when you get the diagnosis, you're going to know exactly what to do, because you've practiced that and you've had a lifestyle of that. And you're like, hey, you know what, devil? Not today. Not today. So happy Tuesday, everybody. Enjoy the rest of your day.